So welcome everybody to this webinar introducing the Family Law Service for Aboriginal Communities. Before we start the webinar properly, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which we are broadcasting today. I'm broadcasting from the land of the Widjabul-Waiable people of the Bundjalung Nation. We pay our respects to the elders of this land, both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar today or watching the recording. So just to let you all know that this webinar will be recorded and will be available for viewing at a later stage on the Legal Aid New South Wales YouTube channel. My name is Bridget Barker and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. This webinar will run for approximately an hour in total, including time for questions and answers at the end. After the webinar, you will receive an evaluation survey, and we do really value any feedback you might like to share with us. And I will upload a copy of the presentation as a handout into the chat during the webinar today, and I'll also send it by email following the webinar. So today's webinar is introducing a new service in Legal Aid New South Wales. If you're joining us from another state, you may not have this same service or similar services. Now I'll introduce you to your presenter for the webinar today, Julie Marshall. Welcome, Julie. Julie's from our Family Law Service for Aboriginal Communities. Thanks, Julie.
Oh, hello, or Ginagain and Jarwin, everyone, and my Gumbaynggirri people will know that that means hello. So I'm on Gumbaynggirri land, and I also want to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. I actually live and work on Gumbaynggirri land, but I am a Wanneroo, Darkinjung woman by birth. So thank you all so very much for coming today and finding out about our service. So the Family Law Service for Aboriginal Communities is a service that's only just been established at the end of last year. We haven't actually had an official opening yet with Legal Aid, and watch this space, that'll be happening. Don't think it'll be too exciting, but just to say that we actually do have an official launch. But in relation to the service, it was...
Julie, I'm really sorry to interrupt your flow. You're slightly faint
okay.
From my end. I'll just ask if you wouldn't mind, in case other people are experiencing that, if you wouldn't mind perhaps speaking a little bit closer. Thank you.
My sincere apologies. Is that any better? Yes. Okay. So Family Law Service for Aboriginal Communities is fondly named by the acronym FamAC. So anytime you see FamAC, it's in relation to FamAC, which is our service. So the service, I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint. I think I've got 5 or 6 slides. So I want to have a chat to you about what our service does, and then have a quick chat to you about the Indigenous list and how we're involved in that, and how that's helping members. And then after that, I've got a tiny little sort of case, just so that you can see from a perspective of how we're involved and how people can flow through those legal systems. So Aboriginal people, as all of you would know, tend to have great difficulty in engaging with services, and particularly government services. And that's from an area of disadvantage, but also an area of intergenerational trauma, and from which goes all the way through. And even though colonisation was some time ago, those that disadvantage and the reminders of that are still there in our community today. So Family Law Services for Aboriginal Communities, as you can see on your first slide there, is we're a state-based system. So there's one group, and I can tell you now we have 8 solicitors, and we do the entire state. So we can't be involved in every matter that there is an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person involved in within the care and protection or the family court. We would love to, but unfortunately we just do not have the manpower to do that. So we've got 8 solicitors that are working all over the state. And we do a lot of that remotely, but we also do a lot of outreach face-to-face. So we're a pretty busy lot, as it may seem. So our team mainly tries to focus on early intervention, outreach, so that we can try and keep people out of the legal systems. If we can't, then we do some casework, but we mainly focus on the casework that really does need a culturally appropriate solicitor. So if we can refer back to our local legal aid office, or if someone else has some abilities to be able to navigate a bit better than other clients, then we'll try and keep those still in-house within legal aid, because we think that we can provide a service there that can be tailored to them. But if we have clients that are really having trouble engaging, we've got significant mental health, we've got the domestic violence happening, and a lot of the time we have clients that have come from the care and protection system themselves. So they have no family, no support. They're the sort of clients that we are mainly taking. If the powers to be want to give us more manpower in the future, we're happy to extend that and take as many as we possibly can. But our main focus at the moment is on what we call short services, so providing advice, minor legal assistance, those sorts of things. However, we all have an extensive caseload within the litigation practice. So the litigation practice would be within the care and protection jurisdiction, as well as the family court. We do a duty service that is in relation to the Indigenous list. So in Sydney, there's an Indigenous list. We've got them opening up in Dubbo, and I'll have a chat to you in a little while about the one that's just started this year in Lismore. And we also have them in other states as well that have started to roll out. But these are really culturally appropriate, more tailored family law courts. So I will go into that a little bit further on. But our main aim is to make sure that we do have a culturally appropriate service and that everyone is able to access that. So our advice, our outreach and our duty service is always open, and we will take as many people as referred to us as we possibly can in relation to those areas. With the FamAC and the way we operate as a team approach. So we don't say Julie has this matter that's in her caseload. Everyone in our team will know about what case it is. So we actually have meetings once a week. We talk about our cases. We do out of the box thinking. We also have discussions about how things might be able to move between courts, and if we can make application for care and protection matters to move to the family court, which may be a more family-led decision system rather than the care and protection system. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so as I said, we've got those 8 lawyers on the ground. And other than that, we have non-legal support staff. So we've got some administration staff. We're at the moment looking for a paralegal. And we also are currently recruiting a mental health care worker, although we do have a pseudo mental health care worker until we fill that position, which is completely, it's such a valuable service to have. And we have 3 Aboriginal field officers. Currently, we're still looking at where the 3rd officer will be, and we're tossing up between the north and the south coast. We're trying to make sure that we have services where there are not legal aid officers. So that enables people that are really disadvantaged in obtaining legal advice can actually approach us and can get some legal advice in those areas. So the non-legal team, the mental health care workers, are contacting our clients, particularly if they're having trouble navigating the system. That enables the solicitors to actually work on the legal aspects of their case. And we have our support workers, our field officers and mental health staff being able to contact and help our clients with referral to other services such as housing, making sure they have a mental health care plan, getting them into contact with psychologists or caseworkers. Some of them may need assistance to, contact family, or there's such a vast array of things that people need. And by not having the benefit of getting assistance with those types of things impacts their legal issue. So a prime example might be if we've got a mum whose children are looking at being removed, it may be because A, she doesn't have housing, she doesn't have supports, she can't access healthcare due to funding and those sorts of things. So what we try and do is have a more holistic approach by having a whole team work around that client, and we give them the priority of not only helping them with their legal problem, but also helping with their social problems. And so that even if the legal issue doesn't work out the way they want it to, hopefully they leave our service much better informed, but also in a better social position when they first came. So the next slide, please. I'm not reading these slides. I'm sure you can read them in your own time, but just in general, our outreach programs at the moment, you'll see on that slide there, we have them at Moree, Derriton and Wentworth. And we are also setting up, I have a application in at the moment to start outreach in Yamba McLean, Casino, Coraki and Tabulum areas. We're also putting an application together at the moment in relation to Tweed Heads and Mullumbimby, because they're up on the border. There is no legal aid office any closer. We go Coffs Harbour, then to Lismore. So that's a sort of an area there that is a bit of a black hole for services. The reason I've concentrated on the Northern Rivers is at the moment that's where I'm predominantly working, but I have other team members that are working. We also have a service out at Bororona. So we're looking at all those areas, and also possibly setting up one out near Tamworth as well. So looking at all those areas, we're trying to look at outreach areas where we can actually provide the most benefit to the community, and particularly where they have a really limited number of services, be that Aboriginal legal services, the community legal service, or legal aid. So to do that, we've looked at a lot of data. The Northern Rivers actually has one of the highest ROSH reports, which is the risk of harm reports for children, particularly for Aboriginal children within New South Wales. So we're concentrating a little bit up there in relation to doing some of those early intervention services, so that we can give parents advice in relation to working with the department, so that they can go on parenting contracts, or looking at safety plans and looking at family, and helping them identify all those services before the department actually step in and look at that removal stage. So by giving really good legal advice right at the beginning, and help with FamAC helping with their social service network, we can actually hopefully reduce the number of children at risk. And we're going to try and tackle that in smaller areas, and then expand out from there. So that at the moment, that's our focus. So we're also looking at where else we can do outreach programs, and most of those will be up and running before May, even though we do have quite a few running at the moment. So the next slide, please.
Julie, there is just a question, and I noticed
Yep.
this slide refers to the far south coast. Do you know if there's any planning about when outreach services might be available on the far
We're
south
actually
coast?
we're in negotiations at the moment about that. We've got a proposal. We've got some proposals in at the moment about trying to get a field officer stationed down the far south coast, so that we can actually do that. We do already do a phone service down there, and we work with some of the women leaving custody programs and referral services for the far south coast. However, we are looking at a proposal to try and get that up and running, and if we can, it will be before the middle of the year. I hope that answers your question. So, and that probably leads on to this one. So the other thing that we're involved in, and I'll be helping head the program, which is the Aboriginal Women Leaving Custody program. So we know that Aboriginal women are at a significant disadvantage, particularly trying to get back relationships with their children when they do come from custody, but also you come out of custody, as I suppose all inmates do, and where do you go from there? What services, particularly if you don't have family, and if you've grown up in a significant disadvantaged area, it's quite likely that you don't have family that you can actually be paroled to stay with. And so they're left with housing, or they might be forced to go back and stay with DV perpetrators because they do have no other option in which to live in the community. So to overcome those, what we're trying to do is set up a program and work with the women as before they're released, and as they're released, and then after they're released. So providing those wraparound services for those women we're saying is the best way to try and get an outcome. One, to stop the recidivism rate, but also to allow them to become really active members of the community and get their children back, or at least get time with their children and their families, because not losing that connection can sometimes lead to recidivism, and we've looked at some stats in relation to that. So having a look at trying to make sure that we put the best processes in place to allow these women the best possible outcomes they can. So presently, this is working at Silverwater. So what we want to do now is roll that out in a cultural safe way by using FamAC, but also using the civil Aboriginal team called Classic, and we're going to work together in relation to this. So the Civil Law Services for Aboriginal Communities and the Family Law Services for Aboriginal Communities are coming together to develop this system and roll that out to other places other than Silverwater. So at the moment, I've made contact with the Clarence Valley Correction Centre on the Mid-North Coast, and also the Mid-North Coast Correction Centre, which is near Kempsey, and we're also making connections with Wellington and Broken Hill. So if we can put those services and get a commitment from the corrective services to work with us in relation to that, that's hopefully going to give us some better outcomes for women as they leave custody, but also for the community. And hopefully that will also lead to the reduction of children required to be in care if we can get mums skilled up enough to actually then make what we call a Section 90 application to actually have the children replaced back with the parents once they've done rehabilitation and they're out of custody. And if it's safe for those children to be returned to their homes, obviously that's a better outcome for the children, because we know there's significant less well, they receive a better outcome if they're with family, I think is what I'm trying to say. The outcomes for children that remain in care are quite significantly lower than those that remain in homes with supports in place. And so that's that program. So hopefully we can get that up and running as well. So if I could just have the last slide. Oh no, is there one more? Oh, sorry, we'll go to that one in a minute. So that's the case that I was going to run you all through. But before that, I just wanted to have a really quick chat about what the the Indigenous list is. So it's a family law list that was set up some years ago now by Judge Robin Sexton, and then it's now been taken over by other members of the judiciary. But I don't know if any of you actually saw a short video that was circulated a few years ago now called Our Children, and Robin set that up with help from Rick Walsh and a number of other people in Sydney, that showed community members that try not to be scared of the legal system, and there are ways that the family law legal system can work for you to prevent children being removed under the care and protection system. Obviously, we still need the care and protection system. There's always going to be times when children are needed to be removed because they don't have a safe home to live with. But our view currently is there are definitely some times when culture can play a huge role in the protection of children, and for a long time that has not been looked at appropriately. I think there are times that the care and protection system don't look far enough into kinship and family placements, and and I suppose the family law system, it's one way of looking outside the box by using one legal system to prevent the removal of children under a different legal system. So the family law and federal circuit courts, as they're called now, they realised a couple of years ago that to actually enable Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to actually be meaningfully engaged with family law systems, they needed to change the way that the system was working. Obviously, it's a very traditional system. There's a huge hierarchy, and due to trauma and problems navigating that system, it really was not a fair system for Aboriginal people to be involved in. And I can say that from a personal perspective, for the mere fact that I've been involved in the family law jurisdiction now fairly short period of time, I suppose, in the scheme of things. So about 10 years I've been a family lawyer. Prior to that, I had 22 years in the police force as a detective sergeant, and I was in the criminal justice system working with Indigenous clients as well. So to see the difficulty they have in navigating all those systems, I think has been really good stepping stones to put me where I am now in this system. So, and particularly working in this amazing FamAC section that I found myself in. So what I did when Robin Sexton made that DVD, and it got circulated by the Family Law Pathways Network and all those sorts of systems, we looked at other pilot areas where possibly we could set up Indigenous lists. So there have been a number of places earmarked. I believe Dubbo is starting to do one. They've also got a special care and protection list out there too, but that's a story for another day. But Lismore was also looked at as a pilot. I have been working on the submissions from that since 2018, and finally in January this year, 2023, we opened what we call the Special Indigenous List in Lismore. So it's called the Special Indigenous List as different to the Indigenous list, which is everywhere else, is because it's the only list run by a senior judicial registrar and not a judge. We don't think there's any detriment in that. The senior judicial registrar holds all the same powers. However, when the matter goes to a final hearing, a judge would then be appointed, and that would be Judge Turner. So it's the same judge. It's just for ease and to ensure that we have enough court dates that there's a senior judicial registrar appointed there. Now, that system has been working now for a couple of months. Obviously, part of those delays for all those years where it was meant to open and we had COVID, and then we had the massive floods in Lismore. So we're probably 3 years behind where we wanted to be, but it's opened now and we're going to concentrate on the positives. So with that with that list, it's already been quite beneficial. We have in excess of, last time I checked, there was 27 families involved in that court system, and that is growing every day. I know I was called to do a duty on Monday, and a matter that was in the normal list was transferred to the special Indigenous list on Monday. So every day that is growing within the Northern Rivers and Northern New South Wales. So this list covers not only Lismore, everyone from Tweed, basically down to Port Macquarie, and from then on, then they go down to Newcastle. There's also a new Indigenous list set up in Brisbane this year as well. So they actually are a growing trend, and you may or may not realise that the family court is a Commonwealth jurisdiction. So unlike the care and protection legislation, which is only our state, the family law covers the whole of the Commonwealth. So we have these set up in all the other states as well, but they all work under the same model. So the model that these are working under are in relation to trying to be more culturally sensitive. So the system's set up different, language is used differently. Elders are encouraged to come along with their family members, and they can take part in the litigation with the consent of the parties. As long as one person within the litigation system is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you're allowed to access that system. You can make application to file with that system straight up, or you can be referred from the other normal Federal Circuit and Family Court lists. You do have to consent to be part of that list. And it is dealt with in a slightly informal way. The judge will come down from the bench. We sit more in a circle in a round table. We also have a Aboriginal field officer that's appointed by the court. And then one of our solicitors will be there on every list day for every Indigenous list in the area. So that's what we need. So they're the services we provide. Not only is there legal staff available, we've also got social services set up. So we have men's support groups and women's support groups turning up at the court on these days, so that if parents might need to be referred to a domestic violence course, or if they need to do a drug test or anything like that, we can actually have services there helping them arrange that on the day, so that they don't leave the court without a plan. They know what's going on and they know who to contact. And we also have our mental health care workers and our Aboriginal field officers who are also following those up. So providing those wraparound services for clients, we are of the view will provide better outcomes and try and keep families together, but also make family law orders more workable for families, because we're not only looking at what's working for the children, we're also looking at cultural orders. So it might be that mum and dad, share parental responsibility for long-term decisions of the children. However, it might be the grandmother who has parental responsibility for cultural education and language. So those orders can vary. So if now's a good time, I might just move on to a little case that I've just written up. So I suppose just so you can actually see how the systems can work. So this one's called Jinda's Story, or Jinda's Journey, and it is loosely based on an actual matter that I have had. So this is a young woman. She's 8. If you can picture a young woman, she's 18 years old. She's just about to have another baby, and she has just been involved in the removal of her first child, which is now in the care of the minister until 18. And she grew up in the outer home care system herself, so she has very limited supports in place. So how does she get involved in our service? So fortunately, this young mum was referred to us by a local legal aid office who had dealt with the removal of her first child when she was 17. Very, very sad story. This young mum had also, while she was in care, and it's not on that slide, but it also had a baby at 16 that was stillborn. So she had a lot of trauma there. She'd also been significantly abused while in out-of-home care. And she'd actually been in 38 placements before she was 12 years old. So for her, the worry of her child going into out-of-home care was a really, really current feeling for her. And you can tell from that short background that I gave you how traumatized she would be having her baby removed, thinking that her child was then on the same trajectory as what she may have, that she found herself on. So what can we do? She's pregnant with her second child. She's referred to us. So what happens is, even before the pregnancy, we started working with her. We also had a social worker in our team start working with her, building up a rapport and a relationship so that we could actually build that trust. You can imagine, from someone in this sort of situation, hard to build trust. She's been let down by lots of people, and I suppose to a large degree, she's really looking for someone to trust. She's looking for love, and she's looking for something that's more permanent when you look at how transient her life has been, and at no fault of her own to a large degree. Unfortunately, she had been involved with some drug use. She doesn't pick the best partners. She's picked people that are quite violent towards her and those sorts of things. And as a result of that and the trauma that she's in care, but also she did have some disabilities and some mental health issues that were genetic as well. So we had to deal with all those. What we did was got some services, wrapped those around her. We got her into a mental health care plan. We helped her with an NDIS package. And we also got her into domestic violence training and drug use. And I can tell you that, you know, I could do a bit of a spoiler alert, she's now completely drug free, and I can say that because I've actually recently got some drug results from her, just to show me that she's actually maintained that, which is, you know, really amazing for this girl on her own. So DCJ are obviously circling. So we're moving along this ladder. We've started to get involved. So we know DCJ are circling. So what do? So FamAC and our team, we decided that, okay, let's jump on this early. Let's contact DCJ. Let's start having those conversations even before the baby's born. So we started doing those. We knew that there was a birth alert on this mum. So as soon as the baby was born, we'd already made contact also with the midwives, because we know DCJ have the birth alert in the hospital. We'd made contact with the midwives. So what we did then was, when she went into hospital to give birth to this child, we were notified that she's in hospital giving birth. So what we wanted to do was contact her, make sure that she had that reassurance that we were still there supporting her when she gave birth. The only person she had with her when she gave birth was her NDIS worker. She had no family in which to support her in that process. So we were really grateful that that was the case, but we will be able to contact her at the hospital straight after and before DCJ contacted her. No longer had we stopped speaking to her and DCJ rang about coming in and seeing the child. So to actually be able to put her at rest and not be heightened as soon as she's given birth that DCJ are going to come in and remove the child was beneficial. So that's sort of a little social aspect, which I think is something we can offer people in those really vulnerable times. So following that, she reached out. We had a chat about what all her options were. We looked at safety plans with DCJ. We were still really worried, or mum was still really worried, and rightly so. You know, she's had a really bad experience. So our workers, our team, our social workers, our liaison officers and our solicitors are all reaching out to this mum in all those different areas, making sure she's staying in touch with these services. She started to feel a bit better, that she was supported. But then as time went on and DCJ is still there, what she wanted to do was look at a legal option. So the legal option we recommended was that why don't we file in the Federal Circuit and a family court. Now, there was a grandmother that was able to, she had no criminal history, no drug use, no issues with violence. She was sound of mind. She had a couple of health issues, but probably diabetes was the worst one. And we were able to put an argument forward to say, well, look, you know, I can't see why that is a barrier for her helping mum look after the child. DCJ obviously didn't think that was appropriate first time around, but so what we did was we looked at the Federal Circuit and Family Court and we filed in the Special Indigenous List. So the Special Indigenous List, and this was the first matter that went in front of the list in January at Lismore. So there were initial orders then made that on an interim basis that the child was to live with the mother and the maternal grandmother. And that has been the case up until now, and orders have been made that will be the case. DCJ were obviously served with all those documents and they were invited to come along, but they said that at the moment, as far as they were concerned, the court could make the safety areas, the safety decisions for this child in the family court. And so they didn't actually become involved within the court system. But we've kept them up to date, and we've also made sure that the newborn has remained in care with mum. Mum has all the supports she needs in place. She's got support workers working with her. So the child's actually living with the mother, and then the grandmother is a backup. So the safety plan is that although they share parental responsibility, mum's living independently on her own at the moment. But if anything happens, if there's any violence, if there's any issues, then the safety plan is in place, and there are court orders that the child must then go and stay with the maternal grandmother. So that is one way we've been able to help this mum keep her child, and she's now looking at the end of the year, hopefully looking at ways where she can get her other little one back in her care. So hopefully that's going to be something that we can do. So I suppose listening to me rabbit on, and I do apologise, this is the first time I've done a webinar if it's not obvious to everybody. So I'm not sure how I did, but if you've got any questions, I'm open to those.
Thanks so much, Julie. I think that's been such great information, and I found the case study really helpful and interesting, as I'm sure our audience have. There have been a couple of questions. There was a question, are you working with and or referring to community legal centres that are currently already working in these areas? I'm not quite sure if that was a reference to the areas where the correctional facilities were located or where FamAC is working.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. So what we're trying to do is we've got a list of all community centres that are working in the areas where we are and that provide outreach or provide support in the areas that we're looking at. And what we want to do is we don't want to take away from those services. An example is the Far North Coast. There's a community legal centre that's working down there with women leaving custody. So we wouldn't be stepping on their toes to do that because they are the ones that have the funding to do that. What we're looking at is providing services in areas where there are not those facilities. We're happy to refer to, but also be used as a support, I suppose, by the community legal centres as well. So that's something that we're also open to doing, and we are trying to make all those links. Obviously, we've only just got up to full speed staff-wise since February, so we are still working on a lot of that community engagement currently.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, the Kat has clarified she meant both correction facilities and FamAC areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone has asked, how would a person get in contact with FamAC?
Okay, contact any legal aid office, but we've just got a whole heap of flyers that got printed 2 weeks ago, and they're just starting to go up everywhere. So on the legal aid website, there is a referral form for FamAC, but if you cannot find that, just contact your legal aid office and legal aid will be able to refer straight to us. Aboriginal Legal Services also refer to us if they can't assist a client. We have a internal service, and we're hoping to get around all the courthouses and the community legal centres and other culturally appropriate community services, and providing them with all our details, putting some posters up and having some handouts there. So hopefully as the year goes on, that should be a much easier process for everybody. I have
early days.
Also, yeah, it is. But I've also reached out to a number of the DCJ officers, particularly in this area, and I've asked the others too in the areas in which they're working in, and start making some connections with the senior people within the DCJ offices so that they know that we have this early intervention service available, because a lot of the time they're talking to clients without them having legal advice, and we know that that isn't the best outcome for clients, and it often isn't the best outcome for the DCJ workers either. So we're trying to make sure that now when they identify things, and with the Family is Culture report, one of the criticisms of that was that they're not giving Aboriginal families the ability to get advice early on. So hopefully we'll be able to rectify that in the near future as well.
Thank you. There's another question. Do you take referrals from service providers who work with clients heading to the family law system? And if
Definitely.
so, what is the referral service?
Yep, definitely. Just contact legal aid and say you want to refer a client for some legal advice, and tell them that it's appropriate for the family law for Aboriginal communities or FamAC, and they can refer us straight away. And our turnaround at the moment advice is if you ring up 1 week, you should receive advice that week, if not very early the second week. So we actually are prioritising all the advices as they come in. If you've got a client and they find themselves that their first court date is there, and you might be supporting them at court and they haven't been able to speak to a solicitor and they are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, if you just say to the if they ask at any of the duty services and say, I'd like to speak to an Aboriginal solicitor, they can definitely put you in contact with our service as well. And we can ring in and even do that over the phone.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, Charlene. Charlene's asked a question. FamAC doesn't have its own telephone number. Is there plans for FamAC to have a dedicated line or not?
Yeah, we do. We do have our own telephone number. It is, let me have a quick look.
I can always provide that to everybody by email afterwards, Julie, if you don't have it to hand.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's 02 9407 2941, but we can post that. We can post that later, and we also have our direct email, which is which we can post as well if you don't mind, Bridget, which is FamAC.
Happy to.
.newsouthwales.gov.au. So any referral straight in, if you can't find a referral system, if you just email that'll automatically go to our office manager, and she will definitely make sure someone gets in contact with you.
I'll email that to everybody straight after the webinar. Another question, do you work with people who have already had their children removed?
If they still have a legal issue, or if they think that they have been able to make enough progress that may look like that, one, they may need more contact with their children, which is what we call a Section 86 application, or if they've made enough progress that they think that the children would be able to come back and live with them safely and we could do a Section 90 application, then yes. At the moment, we don't have a big enough service to be able to just provide that service for people that are no longer in litigation. However, if we had clients that were in litigation, we wouldn't dump them straight away. We'd make sure they were supported before, and I suppose dumping's not a good word, but we wouldn't just leave them as soon as their matter's over. We'll make sure supports are in place. But definitely if they think that there's a reason that we could assist in the future, whether that even be to increase the contact that you have with your children. I know that there's been a historical situation where a lot of matters have been contact 4 times a year. That's not enough for any even recognition that you have a family, particularly if it's a cultural family. So if that's the case, then definitely we would look at that and try and increase contact with family and on country. I can't hear you, Bridget. I don't know if you're...
Sorry, I've just swapped.
Sorry, no, that's okay. I was just looking at the questions.
Can you hear me now?
Try and, yes, I can. I was going to have a look at myself. Yeah.
Although I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay,
technical difficulties right at the end of a webinar.
Yeah.
There's a question from Ricky, which I'll ask you to respond to, Julie, offline. It's about a specific situation and referral for that. There's another question. Do you have working relationships with Indigenous family liaison officers situated in the Federal Court, Family Court of Australia registries?
Yes, we do. And we have meetings with those. I can tell you that I have lunch meetings with them whenever we have the Indigenous list on, just so that we can regroup. They also have, look, I mean, I can tell you they all have my private mobile number, so that if no one can be reached and we need a duty service, they will ring me directly. And if I can't do it, I will make sure someone does it. So yeah, the working relationships with our Aboriginal liaison staff in the court is really well done.
Sorry,
can you
Julie,
hear me?
I think I accidentally muted you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay. I looked up people asked for a link to the video, the DVD that you referred to. That was part of the Family Law Pathways Network.
It was rolled out.
Is it called Our Kids?
It is, yes.
Okay. I put the link in the chat, but a few people have said that it's not working. So I'll send that link by email, and it should work better via email. Just wondering if there's any other questions. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody has any further questions, come in. In any case, if there are further questions, I'll provide the FamAC email address by email also following this webinar, but we're also happy to receive them at the CLE webinars email address as well. And many of you probably already subscribe, but in case that you're not aware, you can subscribe and receive notification about other webinars that might be of interest to you during the year. And we will be running some webinars with other family law services within legal aid during the year. I'll just check if there's any last questions, just some thank yous coming through. And just to let people know, I did also put the presentation as a handout in the chat, and I'll send that as an attachment following the webinar today. There don't seem to be any further questions come through, so we'll finish the webinar up today. We thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Julie, so much for sharing this really helpful information about the new legal aid service across the state. It's
You're
going to be
more than
great
welcome.
for our communities across the state. So thank you, everybody, and we'll close the webinar now. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.